Welcome back to the Unsensible podcast. I am your host, Karis. Today, I'm so happy to be joined by Eri Koyano, the founder of MenuX, which is a groundbreaking platform changing the way fans engage at sports events. Eri has an incredible journey so far, including an appearance on Make Money Survive, which is a Japanese version of Shark Tank. MenuX is also a semi-finalist at Takeoff Tokyo 2023 and won third place in the Google for Startup Pitch. So today, Eri will be sharing her journey to becoming a founder, the ins and outs of pivoting, and what sets Western and Eastern startup apart. So welcome, Eri. We're so glad to have you here.
Hi, thank you, Chris, for having me on the show. Really excited to be here.
Before we dive into your startup, MenuX, I think what our listeners would really love to understand is the face behind the platform, which is you. In our previous chat, you mentioned your journey spans three very different markets. You're born in the US, you're raised in Hong Kong, and now you're building a startup in Japan. How has this global perspective changed the way you think about building a...
Yeah, so I was born in the U.S. and I was raised in Hong Kong. I went to an international school, and even with my 6 years there, I transferred schools every 2 years. I went through an American education, British education, Japanese education system. So the values were always different wherever I went. The people were different. The language was different. My life has always been about adapting to new places and how can I, survive in this new atmosphere that I'm placed in, and then change right away and kind of switch languages and switch mindsets. I think that has given me this perspective of change is not anything really scary. It kind of gave me the skills to survive wherever I am and adapt to wherever location and people that I'm with.
There's one thing very interesting about your background I would also like to highlight. You went for sport marketing for the Tokyo Olympics. That was huge. And it's very different from what you were doing before. So what drew you to that role, and how did that experience influence what you're building today?
Yeah. So originally I started my career in LA at an ad agency. And so I was doing advertising and marketing, and that was my background. I was actually on the creative side as a producer. And I worked there for a few years, and I kind of saw what my career could look like if I stayed at an ad agency. And I was at a point where that looked stable and it was a great career to have, but I wanted something different. I wanted to kind of experience something completely new. And so I wanted to try something that I can only do in my 20s. So I was 20, I think I was 25 or 26 at the time. And that was right when they announced that Tokyo Olympics was going to be happening in Japan in 2020. They just announced it. So I just came up with an idea of, okay, well, I want to eventually come back to Japan to work. I've never worked in Japan before. So I want to work something related to the Olympics in 2020. But before that, I want to take a year. I want to travel and I want to learn to speak Spanish. And that was my goal. And so I quit my job and I packed my life into a suitcase and I traveled for a year. And then I came back to Japan and found a job in an Olympics, and I kind of dove right in.
An other interesting twist in your background is COVID. Okay. COVID happened at one point. Minor inconvenience of a global pandemic, changing everyone's plan, just a little bit. You took that moment, the time of the world coming to a halt to do something quite different. You joined a coding bootcamp. And I remember in our previous chat, you've mentioned it was one of the hardest things you've done. So what made it so challenging, and what did it teach you?
Right after, I got my dream job, I thought I was going to be experiencing the Olympics and I'm going to maybe continue my, career in the sports event world. But then the COVID happened, and because no one was hiring, I decided to jump into this world of coding and try to pivot into tech. And I thought that I was going to become a software engineer, and I'm going to be, I get to live, work remotely, and I can live in Bali and use my computer and work, for a company. And I thought that was going to be my life. And I went into it, and it was incredibly hard. I don't understand how some people can just pivot their career and become an engineer in 3 months. I clearly could not do it. I graduated, of course, but the eye-opening part for me was being surrounded by these logical-minded people. The way they think and the way they communicate with people are just so different from what happens in the ad agency world, in the sports world. But I did find a space for myself where I originally thought I'm going to be a software engineer, but I did realize that there's actually a need for a place for someone like me who has a background in, marketing and communication skills is being my strength. Being able to be the bridge between the business and the tech. And I think that's a key role for a product manager. And I found that while I was in school, and I decided that this is probably where I'm going to, thrive in.
All these different chapters in your life, like your international background, obviously, the Olympic experience, and even like the coding bootcamp, like you realizing how you can become a bridge between the tech and the end consumer. Like all these things seems to just converge at one point to prepare you for what was coming next, which is what we're going to be talking about. Your startup MenuX. I remember you talk about when MenuX first started, it's not what it is right now. So talk us through that journey.
During COVID, I worked a few months from the US and I saw the QR code menus at restaurants that, happened very, very early on in the US. It was very common. And I thought, this is great. Like, let's bring this to Japan. And I very quickly learned that, I could actually probably try to do this on my own. When I first started my company, it was supposed to be for restaurant tech. But as I was doing all the paperwork, and in Japan, it does take a really long time to just, do one simple paperwork to get through. It took a few months to actually create my company. And by the time I incorporated, all these big companies came up with restaurant menus. And so very quickly, it became a competitive market. And in Japan, you just can't win if you don't have the connections. And I was not able to compete against these giants. I saw very quickly that this is going to be a very tough market for me, single-handedly trying to run this when they have a whole army of people trying to sell this technology. So I kind of thought back about my background, and I wanted to utilize my connections and experiences that I had in the Olympics. And I remember, and culturally too, I know that in Japan, people are obsessed with lines. And I think this is a very common thing in a lot of Asia too, I think, where, we'll very patiently just wait in line until what we want. Something very different from the West. Yeah. And I thought, what? This time can be spent monetizing. This time where people are waiting can be improved. And it's very common, even in concerts or sports events, people come and wait in line for merch 2, 3, 4 hours before game time.
Wow. Yeah.
And all of it is handled, a lot of it is, with cash. And so I thought, okay, why don't we try to enhance this experience for the fans? And in return, try to actually create a data entry point to provide to the event organizers, so we can actually help them with marketing and enhance sales by actually collecting and analyzing data.
What a journey from menu QR code to realizing why are people queuing in lines into thinking about ways to improve that experience. What advice would you give about when to stick to your original vision, grind it out, or when to pivot? Like, how do you know?
For me, the restaurant pivot was very easy because just understanding the culture in the market and also trying it out. I think that's one important thing, is test it out and see if it works. And see how you feel, right? So when I did the restaurants, I actually, we built the product and we said, hey, let's try to, give it out to restaurants for free and let's see if they will use it. And so I actually did like cold call walk-in into restaurants, and I actually tried to talk to these restaurants. And that was probably the most hardest experience I've had. And now I know that I'm terrible with sales. realizing that, wow, restaurant people are they're non-technical, first of all, right? And a lot of them are over 90%, it's a male dominated industry. And, it's a very like grit, right? You put your years in and then you can maybe have a restaurant. And so, here comes a woman that walks in and say, hey, we're going to enhance your sales by 30% if you just, use this product. I mean, these Japanese men were not happy with it at all. And a lot of the times they expected me to come and eat at the restaurant multiple times until they would even look at me or even like have a conversation with me. And I very, very quickly realized that this was going to be time and money consuming, both of which I didn't have. And so for me, it was pretty an obvious decision to just be like, okay, I could do this if I had the time and money, which I don't. But let's try to find something that is, a quicker route. And so that's how I pivoted.
I am curious about how do you validate these new decisions? So when you decide to switch to a fan engagement platform, what kind of moment, or is there some metrics that tell you, yeah, I'm moving in the right direction?
I'm kind of always stumbling into these situations where I see, okay, this is a problem. Let's try to test it if people will like it. And then I, experience other people or talk to different people and I see, okay, well, this is actually the pain point. And I think I'm also still in that discovery phase of figuring out what the actual core problem it is that I want to solve. And I think you also have to understand that this industry changes so quickly, and it's not really about when you make that decision or pivot. It's about how you navigate after you make that decision. That's the harder part, and that shows whether you can survive or not, I think.
Before we dive deeper, I think this is a perfect moment for you to help our listener understand what is MenuX. So can you tell us what MenuX is today in 30 seconds?
Yes. So MenuX right now, we're on a mission to revolutionize fan engagement through practical tools and experiences. And we want to guide fans from all the way from anticipation to celebration. From the moment you know that you're going to this event, we want to help you stay excited. And when your team wins, we want to be there to actually get you more excited and want you to come back to the stadium and continue to follow the fan and continue this journey of this excitement. And that can be right now, we're starting in the shape of seamless experiences with merchandise. But in the future, I see this with gamification or raffles or meet and greets or exclusivity. And we want to just bring in more exciting features to get people just have fun. I mean, it's after COVID, we can meet people, we can actually be in one place, and I want to help people get excited.
Do you have any interesting story you can tell us about these anticipation and celebration that you've encountered since you started?
Interesting stories. When people go globally, when they look at Japan, they think oh my gosh, Japan is so high tech and we're, one step ahead and we're the future. And that's amazing, but that's really kind of the world that is created through media, because when you actually work here, it's incredible how archaic our work culture is. And, when I pivoted into sports and I started interviewing people and I said, hey, where do you guys collect your data? And they say, we don't. And I said, well, how do you know who's buying your product, or how do you know who your fans are? And they say, we don't want it. We don't need it.
Okay.
They find data actually more of liability for them, because they're more worried about leaking the data. What do we do if we accidentally leak the data? And even with sales, they don't have the data because they're still doing sales with fax machines. And they have these printouts. And it's one thing to try to sell someone this new experience of fan engagement and games, and it all seems like a cool idea. But when you know that they're still in a place of, managing their fan clubs and Excel sheets or fax machines, you can't start there. And so it's really, how can you connect with the people that you're trying to sell to? How can you actually empathize with them and support them? It's kind of like an educational phase, not just for myself, but also for them.
Yeah. Have you started seeing some attitude shift or change in, slowly embracing the data?
I think as a culture, we tend to get really excited with buzzwords. And so right now, of course, the trend is AI, and everyone's talking about AI this, AI that. But, there's so many times where I have to be like, AI is great, but also like, let's step away from Excel sheets first before AI, right? Let's get away from fax machines first.
Baby step,
Baby steps. So it's managing that expectation and the growth speed, and I think they're willing to, or they're seeing how technology can have powerful influence to business, but it's also trying to take baby steps to get there.
Is there any particular learning or knowledge or insights that you're applying to MenuX right now from Tokyo Olympics?
I think just seeing how it doesn't even matter what your background is. It doesn't even matter if you love the sport or not. It doesn't matter if you're a super fan. Just for this hour, 2 hour period, fans that come in the stadium really build the energy there, and everyone's there for one goal. And it doesn't matter if you don't speak the language. It doesn't matter if you know the rules. None of that matters, right? And it's that energy is something that I want to be able to recreate or enhance that through technology. And so I always try to keep that in mind of, what is fan engagement and what does excitement mean? And can we actually scale that to something that goes outside of a sports stadium? Can that translate into, for example, a music festival or a food festival, or even, shopping malls or anywhere really that has a group of people with one same goal? How can we enhance that experience for those people? I try to always keep that in mind.
So last time when we chat, I did ask you one question about, what do you think is one thing that you really want to share with our listeners? And we touched upon the topic of Western versus Eastern startup. Japan's startup ecosystem will be very different from Silicon Valley or even Hong Kong, where you've also lived. So how has your, understanding of the Asian market evolved since starting MenuX?
As a country, we're getting to a point and realizing that startups are something that, should be, we should help enhance as a government. And so there's more and more, accelerator programs and fundings that really help these startups. But there's just so few of us here. And I think part of it comes from just the type of education we have here too, where we're kind of taught to, we're raised to learn that stability is success, to be in a good name company in a corporate, and to, have a good title, and to just be there and as a manager of a big corporate. Like that's what success looks like. And no one has ever said it's okay to fail or like try something and, just try it out for the sake of trying it out. That's just not how our education system is. The reason why I decided to incorporate here instead of in the US is it's just so easy to stand out because there's just really none of us here. There's really only so many early startups here, and let alone like a female founder. There's really not many of us. And so with that, you stand out whether, for good or bad. But if you can take that to your advantage, I think it's a really good opportunity to take your startup to a next level. And I think I've been able to leverage that.
I remember that's like a very interesting story you share about building in Japan, about offering something for free in Japan as a very different thing versus in the Western world.
The one wrong choice I made building my startup is I assumed too quickly before knowing my audience. And when I first created MenuX for the restaurant industry, we built it very quickly and we said, hey, let's just try to test this for free. Let's try to have people use it for free. There's no, fees for them. They won't lose anything. We just want the experience and we just want to know, we want to get feedback. Why wouldn't people use it, right? So we're like, great, this is great. We'll just walk into these restaurants, have people use it for free, and we're just going to have so much data that eventually, we can sell it. And we just assumed that was how it's going to be. But in Japan, very quickly, I realized that there's nothing more doubtful to this culture than free. Free means that it's something sketchy. Like, why is it free? Whereas in the West, like free, free is
Sign
great.
me up.
Like free pizza, awesome, right? Like people will show up. But here, it's free doesn't always mean a good thing. And we offered it for free, and it was the response I got was why. What's behind it, and also like why would we use a free product? Like there must be something wrong with it.
Yeah, nothing is for free now. Nah, no more. If you can go back and give advice to younger Eri when you first started MenuX, what would you say?
Oh my gosh. The one advice. To be honest, I feel like I wouldn't do anything else any differently than I have. And
Wow,
I
I
think
love
that's
that.
just my personality too. But I kind of jumped into it. I had no idea what I'm doing. Like, barely had a product. I completely assumed that people were going to use something that we built that no one wanted. And we just jumped in and we just said, hey, we're going to do it. We incorporated and let's go. But I'm not sure that I would do it any other way with my experience that I had back then. Maybe there is one, and I think this is still something, it's not really advice because I'm still struggling for it right now, is I think have a partner, to try to do this together with. But be careful with who you choose to, because this is like a marriage, right? You're going to be like married to this person as a partner of a business. And so, don't jump into it too quickly. You don't have to, make decisions very quickly, because this one will be quite permanent, right? This person is the one that's going to either make or break your business. But I do wish that I had a partner early on to help guide me in the places that I don't have the skill sets for.
We've covered so much ground today, from your, global experience to finding the right problem to solve to, really fascinating cultural insight in Japan. But what I love most about founders is what I call their superpower. They always see something others don't see yet. So I have to ask, when you think about or imagine the future of sports fan engagement in maybe Japan or beyond, what excites you the most?
I see sports as something kind of similar to the way I was raised, where I was just always moving around. And the sports is similar in a way where it really doesn't matter what your background is. Just for that hour, like I mentioned earlier, just for that time, people can be happy and excited and have, be connected. And that's what I think really excites me, or that's what I strive for, is how we can actually connect with people that are maybe on the other side of the world, or maybe not even speaking a language, or just, maybe not even having this interest. But how can we actually take sports or take a technology and help people connect, in a way that's outside of the traditional just going to a stadium and physically watching a game? How can we actually use technology to connect with people in a different way outside of just sitting down?
Yeah, sustaining that sort of connection or engagement outside of the field or outside of the stadium with the use of technology. So as we're recording, now it's November and we're approaching the end of year, and 2025 is the time you take out a new notebook and mark down your new year resolution. So bringing it back to MenuX specifically, what is next for MenuX? What are the new year resolution you're writing down?
Oof, I think we this year was a big one for me because we were able to get our first customer and testing different things. And so now MenuX has turned into, I think this is what they want, to getting closer to like this is what they want. How can we actually enhance this? And I'm talking to now more different types of sports teams and sports organizations, and even people outside of the industry, like events as well, and music. And what has become clear for me with MenuX is I really want this to be utilized or somehow partnered for the LA Olympics in 2028. So that's what I'm really
Wow.
looking forward to and looking into, because it's not just I think a company goal, but it's also something for a personal one too, where I was part of it and I didn't get to experience it fully, and so I would love to join that now with my own company and trying to see how we can enhance this fan engagement. Maybe it's just for all the Japanese tourists going into LA, or maybe I think it can take different forms. Maybe it's games, maybe it's I still haven't really made that concrete, but that's also on my list too, is figuring out how can I actually get to my clear goal of 2028. That's what I want to figure out in 2025.
Amazing. I'm having goosebumps. I'm so excited for you. Hopefully in 2028, you can look back at this podcast and say like, hey, I made it, Eri.
I hope so.
You recently posted about how hard it is and how isolating it can feel being a founder. And I think that's something that we have heard time and again. So thank you very, very much for sharing your story with us today. I think your experience here can really, give a lot of comfort and above all, a sense of camaraderie to fellow founders or people who are trying to build something and trying to change the world for the better. So thank you so much, Eri, for joining us today.